What's going on, guys? Chris here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're talking about one of the best cameras Canon has ever made, the Canon 1DX Mark II. Yes, this camera can burst really fast and it takes really high quality photos, but in today's video, we're gonna figure out if this is really a camera worth it in 2023. To spoil the rest of the video, the answer is yes. It is definitely worth it in 2023. It obviously isn't as technologically advanced as something like the Canon R5. So let's just start off with the pros. And the first thing is the build quality. The build quality of this camera is no joke. I know the Canon R5, which is what I'm shooting on right now, is a professional body, but this feels really professional. And what I mean by that is it feels a lot more robust. The R5 just feels a lot more plasticky when compared to the 1DX. You can really feel the magnesium underneath the rubber. And I actually did drop this not really high. I was like a foot and a half off the ground and it bounced around a little bit, but there was no sign of wear. And obviously the camera worked perfectly afterwards. And this also speaks to the buttons. All the buttons feel really nice and clicky. I don't really like the shutter button on the Canon R5. It feels very soft and you can't always tell if you've pressed it. But on the 1DX Mark II, not only do you feel the haptic feedback of the shutter actually clicking, but the button just feels a lot more clicky in general. It doesn't have a rotating screen, which is unfortunate when shooting in different angles, but I feel like that does help the build quality because there are many times when I'm shooting with the R5 and I'm very afraid that the screen is gonna snap off because it's in weird positions or you may bump into it. So having a fixed screen on the camera just helps you feel a little bit more safe when handling such a big and heavy camera. I can tell this camera has really true weather sealing, not only how you open and eject the battery, but also how you open the card slot. Now on most camera, there's a card door that you just kind of pop open with your finger. This one has a literal locking mechanism, which keeps your cards nice and safe from water or dust or anything that may damage it. Oh yeah, by the way, this is a Black Magic lens cap. I just had one sitting around and I feel like it looks cooler than the traditional Canon one. But no, if you buy one right now, it will not come with a Black Magic lens cap. But yes, mounting lenses feels very solid, very secure. There were a few times with the Canon EOS R that I would mount a lens to it and there was a little bit of wobble, a little bit of give from the lens mount, but this just feels extremely solid and secure in the hands. A few days ago, I was shooting in the literal rain and had absolutely no issues. The next thing we're going to talk about is battery life. Now, I have no idea what the battery life is on this camera, but I did 2 full day shoots of photo and video and I got to about 50% battery. So I could comfortably say that I could probably use this camera 3 days straight without charging it. It uses Canon's LPE19 batteries, and that is something that I really do appreciate. Something that is a little annoying and a little bit tedious is the fact that when shooting with the Canon R5, you gotta bring at least 2 or 3 more batteries on a same day shoot because shooting those 45 megapixel stills and that 4K video really burns through the battery in about an hour or maybe an hour and a half. So I was definitely not used to having a camera that lasts days because you'll be surprised. You'll go on shoots and you think you have enough batteries, but you start melting through it, especially when shooting 4K 120 or bursting a lot of photos, and next thing you know, your camera is dead. But all I know is there is no day shoot I can't do with this camera. And I could probably safely do 2 days as well. And what helps that is the fact that being a DSLR, you don't always have to do the live view. You can just look through the viewfinder. And when shooting photos, you can save a ton of battery life because it consumes way less battery life when you're not using the back screen. The next thing I really love about this camera, and considering when it came out, it seemed a bit ahead of its time, and that's the autofocus. The autofocus speeds on this are extremely fast and extremely reliable. Now, when compared to the Canon R5, I would say the Canon R5 is a little bit snappier, but the autofocus speeds on this are really fast. And because this is a sports photography camera, there's really nothing you can't capture with it. Whether with the live view or the viewfinder, you can burst really fast photos and they're pretty much all gonna be in focus. I had a job yesterday where I was shooting a birthday party and there were a lot of fast moving subject, but I could easily burst it and capture any movement. I do say the viewfinder autofocus is faster than the live view autofocus, so I ended up using the viewfinder more often, but nonetheless, it always nailed focus. Now let's talk about the most important things: photo quality and video quality. Starting off with photo, the photos just look amazing. They're so crispy on this camera. I don't know what it is, but I feel like DSLRs still shoot crispier image than higher resolution mirrorless cameras. And I think I'm gonna make a video about this because I've been saying this for the better part of a year. So if you're interested in a video like that, definitely subscribe to the channel. But I feel like the 20 megapixel photos that come out of this sometimes look sharper than the 45 megapixel photos that come out of the Canon R5. And I do take a lot of photos of many different subjects, whether it's people, cars, cars, landscapes, products, almost anything at this point. But when shooting with the DSLR, the images tend to have this crispness, this 3D pop that I don't quite get with mirrorless cameras. I don't know what it is. The technology is obviously way more advanced in a mirrorless camera, but for some reason, the DSLRs have that really nice look. And then in the video department, this is where I'd say this camera is a bit more lackluster. Yes, it does shoot up to 4K 60 with a small crop of I think 1.3. Otherwise, you can shoot full frame in 1080p. And it does have dual pixel autofocus that works really well, but I would say that the autofocus on the R5 for video is definitely way better. But the video for this is definitely usable, and I'll definitely use it for social media work or vertical content work where I don't really want to shoot in log because I want a faster turnaround. So let's talk about the cons of this camera. First things first, and this was kind of annoying, but the purchasing of a, what are these called? CFast 2.0 cards. Now these cards are rare and quite expensive for some reason, considering not many cameras still use them. This is a 256 gigabyte CFast card, and I can shoot thousands of photos with it because this is only 20 megapixels, but the media is kind of expensive, and I kind of wish it took CF Express Type B cards. The next thing that was a little bit of a con, even though it does help in some ways, is the weight. Now this camera is this heavy. Carrying it around all day, you definitely feel it in the forearms. Now I do go to the gym a lot, and thank God I've been working out my arms, but you'll definitely notice the weight of this camera when compared to a mirrorless camera like the Canon R5, especially when paired with a lens with the Sigma 50mm 1.4 art, which is one of my favorite lenses right now. You will feel it. It was definitely a bit strenuous using it, but I do say that it was worth it in the end because of the image, and I find myself being a bit more stable when shooting handheld photos and videos with a heavier camera. Which leads to my next point, is that the sensor is not stabilized. I've been spoiled. My past two cameras, the R6 and the R5, have both had IBIS. IBIS being in-body image stabilization, where the sensor moves around to compensate for your movements. You can enable some sort of digital image stabilization, but I never do that because it crops in on the image. But not having IBIS just makes it a little bit more difficult when shooting handheld, which means you need to go to faster shutter speeds when taking photos, and you need to be a lot more careful when shooting video. That said, thankfully the body is heavier, which helps with keeping it more stable. The next thing I knew it didn't have, but I kind of wish it did, was log. When shooting video, I shoot in the neutral picture profile, but I kind of wish this had a log format because Canon's already notorious for not having a lot of dynamic range, and this camera is no exception. Even the R5 in standard mode, even the R5 in C-Log and C-Log 3, it's kind of weak compared to other companies' log formats like S-Log 3 and a Sony a7S III. But yeah, it doesn't have a lot of dynamic range. Granted, the color science of it looks amazing, like straight out of camera, the colors look amazing. It's just Canons are a bit notorious with the clipping highlights. And finally, the last thing I don't really like about this camera is the fact that it has no eye tracking. It does have facial tracking, which works pretty well, but when shooting portraits, you really want something that can focus on the eye. Because when shooting with a shallower depth of field, if you have facial tracking, it can focus on the nose or the ear or maybe the eye. When shooting portraits, eye tracking autofocus is really what you want because the eye is the most important thing to get in focus. So let's just give an overview and what I think about this camera. I was looking for a B camera for a while. I've tested out a few different cameras, and this is still testing out a camera even though I've completely purchased it. I definitely think this camera is relevant in 2023. The fact that it's actually a lower megapixel count makes it really convenient because when bursting high amounts of photos, which is what I like to do, the file sizes are a lot more manageable. Battery life is absolutely amazing. Spec wise, I think it still beats the Canon EOS R unless you need those extra 10 megapixels because it does shoot a larger scale 4K and 4K 60. Canon R8 is going to be released very soon, and I'm kind of interested to see what that's going to be about. I'm just really happy with this camera. It looks sexy. It feels amazing in the hands. Being able to shoot like this as well as shoot like this just feels great. I always like the idea of a battery grip, but I feel like the ones that you have to purchase for a camera just don't integrate as well as this one does. And this camera just really feels professional. The sound it makes when you're bursting, the simple to use menus and everything, it is still a beast of a camera. You can pick them up for about $1,500 used. A lot of people ask me what you should look at in terms of shutter count. I think this camera is rated at 400,000 or 500,000 shutters. I would just try to find something around 100,000 or less, even 200,000. It'll take you a long time to get another 200,000 on the camera. So I'll just try to find anything, I would say under 200 or under 100,000. And this is a camera I would feel comfortable getting used because it's built like a tank and it just works. So hopefully this video was helpful for you. If you're considering buying the 1DX Mark II in 2023, I highly recommend it. If you have any questions, any comments, leave them down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.